this is our effort to further the cause of Sarthak.
Hello.
I think we lost you, Abhishek.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've lost him. Technology at its best.
It happens. This is called situational disability.
I'm so sorry. As soon as the recording started, all these prompts started coming from this, right in the middle of the screen. This is being recorded. I had to move it out of the way, and I just accidentally closed the window. So I'm really sorry. That was quite clumsy on my part, but I hope I don't repeat any such gaffes again. So yeah, I was saying that this is the second of our series of webinars that we are doing to promote the work that Sarthak is doing in the space of diversity and inclusion. We started our efforts in the UK last year, and since then we've got some like-minded people together who are really married to the cause of doing something for Sarthak in India. Sarthak is doing a fantastic work there in building skills of people and bringing them into the mainstream. We today have a panel discussion on discussing what the workplace should be like, or what can we do for people in the workplace so that they feel empowered, they feel more welcomed, and what do we need to do further that they are more encouraged. With that, we will get to the panel discussion in about 15-20 minutes, but before that, I want to request Dr. Atreya to address this gathering as well as the audience that's live with us on Facebook, to tell a bit about Sarthak, and then we'll jump into the discussion, get ideas from the esteemed panel that we've got with us today.
Thank you, Abhishek. May I first of all compliment you on your second webinar. Things are moving well. The first was excellent. May I also appreciate the beautiful oak tabletop that you have there. Very nice grains. Anurag, are you handling my PowerPoint? Or who is doing that?
Sir, Jasmine is handling. So
okay, may I request you to please start and put the first slide? I'm delighted to be here with all of you. I come from a management perspective. You are all in either independent enterprises or big companies, and you're directly involved in the issue of disability and inclusion. So I'd like to give a broad framework in these 10 minutes that I have. I have just 3 operational slides, 3 minutes each, but lay out the issues. Yeah, waiting, okay. Waiting for I have 3 slides, as I mentioned. First, take a look at the range of diversity. I am 80 now, and I've started seeing this from 1940s and 50s. When I started reading English literature, the picture of Dorian Gray and the kind of issues that it raises. And then the founder of computing, who committed suicide because he was gay and he could not be legally recognized in England. So it has been a long struggle. So there is a range of diversity. Now more and more diversity aspects are being both legally as well as organizationally recognized, included. Anurag, you are on track to find out my PowerPoint. Second, I'd like to briefly recollect, we are all familiar, just for convenience, inclusion challenges. What are the challenges in organizations to bring in these people? And third slide, I'd like to conclude with some best practices and the benefits that have accrued to companies. And I'm sure the panelists will be giving many more real life, recent contemporary examples. So let me start with the range of diversity. This is now summarized in an alphabetical acronym, LGBT. I think the first of these was gay, to get off. Yeah, okay, that's the title is Creating Inclusive Workplaces. Next. This is my brief introduction. Those of you from India who know some Sanskrit will easily understand it. The government of India recognized me with Padma Bhushan, which is something like the birthday awards of the Queen. Bhishma Pitamaha is a famous figure in Mahabharata, and the HR profession has recognized me. I began my career as a cost accountant, so I worked in corporates, and I'm aware in the early conservative years, and more recently, I've been promoting Dharma values. Next slide, please. The contents. Next. Yeah, so this is it. I mentioned these three: the range of diversity, inclusion challenges, best practices and benefits. The next. All right, this is the LGBT. The gays were first recognized. It has always been tougher for women. The slight prejudice, hesitancy, delay in their coming out and their being recognized. And now I think this is comfortably recognized. Even now, in some countries, same-sex marriage is not recognized. In some religions, they are not approved. So the struggle is still ahead for total emancipation in our world. The bisexual was the next to come on and be accepted. The transsexual have been further. And I think we are all concerned with the latest addition. It is not going to stop here. There may be newer categories, persons with disability, which is the official name the United Nations uses, but we use special ability, different ability, and our Prime Minister has given the term Divyang, divinely able to people. And in fact, when you look at some of them, how they overcome, how they perform in life, is amazing. It is divine, highly inspiring, and puts us able-bodied people to shame. The next slide, please. So inclusion challenges, there are many. You're all familiar with them. Some of you are consultants. I have picked on an ABC analysis always the top three. The top management in many companies has many other preoccupations. In my experience, it is not that they are against inclusion, but the idea is not one of the top priorities and nobody has put it to them. They are concerned with profit, shareholder wealth, earnings per share, and now they have a lot of additional worries to take care of. ESG, environment, social, and governance, good governance. The Norwegian fund also looks at inequality index of organizations, and now climate change and going green, various kinds of requirements, pressures. Although thrown off keel by the Ukraine invasion of Russia, this will continue to be a problem. And for us in India, many of you will be familiar, we have made 5 commitments, 4 of these to be achieved by 2030 in the Scotland COP26 conference. But when top managements are presented by the internal HR and outside NGO dealing with PWD and a consulting firm, any 2 or 3 of these, they are willing to listen, open to it. And all we need is their broad approval. And it is then for the HR function to work out the modalities of how we include PWDs in the organization. So if we start with top management awareness and clearance with our intervention, the next problem is the organizational resistance. Not at just the workplace level. It starts at the line management at the very top. People have these prejudices that if I have a tight performance goal and high productivity requirement and a manpower on leash, how can I bring in PWD into it who will drag down the productivity? In fact, our experience has been quite different. So the HR chief has the challenge and the opportunity to overcome this organizational resistance, and we have a lot of theories and models on management of change, how to cope with the resistance and how to leverage the positive forces, how to energize and involve the inert middle, the dormant forces. And the third, if we cross these 2 bridges, there is still a problem. Our experience in Sarthak has been that even if we have demonstrated a few thousand people trained and employed, the newer PWD whom we enroll through our search are initially quite anxious What is the training? Will it be useful? Should I spend 3 months on this? Will it pay off? Is this a waste of time? Will the organization accept me? Will I be able to perform well? Will I lose my job? So they have their anxieties. These have to be also overcome. So these are, in my view, the three major inclusion challenges. And let's look at some best practices, not by company, but as a concept. Next slide, please. I think the top management, many companies now have corporate values, core values, along with vision, mission, and a strategic plan. And inclusion should be an integral part of those core values. Inclusion in a broad sense, not just specifically PWD, all the categories that I mentioned earlier, and any new ones that may come. Inclusion as one of the values approved by the top management and part of the climate creation, communicated, internalized by the senior and middle management against that initial skepticism and resistance. Then there is some need to look at the HR policies and practices, which are normally designed for normal people to include and take care of the special needs of these new entrants. And there's need for PWD, which we are doing in Sarthak, and I'm sure many of you are doing it, using this very comprehensive model. What knowledge do they need to have a productive job in an organization? What kind of attitudes and values they should carry with them, including self-confidence and resilience to cope up with the initial resistance and possibly even some discomfort that the existing labor in the organization may cause. The skills required, of course, to perform the job, as well as behavioral skills of communication, building relationships, becoming part of the team, and maybe in due course, dare we say, even becoming a leader of a team and moving up on the ladder, as many of our alumni have done. And finally, sustain disciplined habits of preparation, homework, delivery in the organization, follow-up, monitoring, continuous learning. So these must not be a one-time affair, but built into the personality of the PWD, knowledge, attitudes, and values, skills, and habits. Then we have found, in initial years, we did this only. Then we found the existing employees in the client organization, the employer organization, where the management is kind enough to take in our trainees. The employees need to be oriented before the PWD comes in, and there are various training methods, and I'm sure some of you are doing it. And we are now doing it for several organizations in terms of creating the right climate for PWD to enter and to make them more productive, comfortable, performing, focus on their job without any anxiety. If organizations do these 4 major best practices, then we have seen evidence after evidence of higher performance and empathy. I've just picked 2 key points. In performance, many things come there: quantity, quality, time, cost. So various aspects of performance is a complex demand in an organization. It is not just spending the time appearing to be active throughout. It must be productively active, doing things according to priority, on time, just like any other employee. And we have found that many organizations now realize that disabled people, PWD people with special abilities, after they have been inducted and got the grip of their job, are in fact higher in their performance and productivity, more disciplined, more committed, and willing to learn continuously. So they surprise the skeptics eventually, and that's a very good thing. I hope this is useful. I look forward to the panel and their very positive and practical experiences and so on, and the discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Australia. People who do not know him, he's the guiding light for Sarthak. He's been associated with the organization since the start. He has held such senior positions in India about doing policy work in the telecommunications sector, policy work in the social sector, and guiding the government on various aspects. So he has been there for Sarthak, and we hope that he'll be there forever for Sarthak. And we really appreciate all his guidance in helping us take the cause further. Now, with that, I want to request Mansi to play a video on Sarthak. That's for people who are learning about it for the first time. That just briefly shows what we do in the social and disability sector.
मेरा नाम वरुण है और मैं सार्थक में काफी टाइम से हूँ और उधर मैंने कंप्यूटर चलाना सीखा है, नेट सर्फिंग सीखा है, एक्सेल सीखा है, वर्ड सीखा है, इंटरनेट चलाना सीखा है और मेरे मम्मी पापा बहुत खुश हैं मुझसे और मुझ पे काफी प्राउड फील करते हैं.
Me and my brother Yogesh Chabra joined Sarthak in 2008. I started my career as a customer support associate in Tech Mahindra in 2012. Now I am working as a senior quality analyst. I don't find my disability as a barrier. I work independently.
सार्थक में हम 3 months का ट्रेनिंग प्रोवाइड करते हैं. 1.5 months basic skill building training, and then 1 month sector specific training, and then 15 days of pre-employment, wherein we teach mock interviews, how to present themselves in interviews, and every Saturday we conduct allied activities like guest lectures, exposure visits, and parents workshop, and we measure their growth from where they start and where they are right now.
We are into IT as organization, wherein business process transformation is our major forte. So in this kind of profile, we hire people into roles like transaction processing, and part of it would be into voice processing. This will definitely help us to curb the attrition and arrest it, because for differently abled, it's just not employment like regular people, it's a career for them. Job satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and their commitment towards their role, their openness towards learning is also added to it. As a human being, you know what you've done to the society and for differently abled people, right? So that is a satisfying factor for you as a human being.
These days, organizations are going in a diverse way. My objective was not to getting somebody hired on a sympathy front, but also to know what are our benefits in this. And surprisingly, that analysis turned out to be very, very relevant, because we had lowest attrition rate in this category. We had people who were highly motivated, who had given good performances. It's not only just good intention that we need, it requires conscious effort.
If I talk about hiring persons with disability, it's a sure shot a business case, as it has multifarious advantages in support of it, such as increased consumer satisfaction, increased employee morale, diverse workforce, plus overall positive image of an inclusive and socially responsible workplace.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Thanks. Very important information there about the numbers of people in India who are disabled, how many of them are in gainful employment, and what Sarthak is doing to help them find employment and build careers. Once you break that cycle, they are out of poverty, they get into the employment cycle, they build their own house, they raise their own family. You just break it once and you start a new cycle for their entire family, not just themselves. And the messages that we got from the corporate sector about people who are actually hiring people with disability, it is again just a reinforcing factor to confirm that even employers are looking for people who have the motivation and who have the passion to succeed, no matter what their disability or lack of ability in something is. We can only help people with disability to get those skills which make them employable. And with that in mind, let's jump into the panel discussion that we have. It's a brief discussion, but it's very targeted on how do we make sure that the corporate sector, the job sector is ready for people who bring special skills with them. Let me introduce our panelists for today. We have Jane Hatton, who is the founder and CEO of Even Break in the UK. She has been in the field of inclusion and diversity since 1990. Intersectionality is of particular interest to her. And after experiencing disability herself in 2004, her main focus shifted to disability. She founded an exciting and award-winning social enterprise called Even Break in 2011, which is run by and for disabled people, which helps inclusive employers attract and retain more talented and disabled candidates. Even Break's portal also shares the best practices for all to become more confident and competent around inclusion and accessibility. We also have with us Giselle Ho, who's the co-founder of the Master Group. Giselle was with us also the last time round. She's the co-founder of Master Group headquartered in Hong Kong, which is an event venue business where she managed to grow its location from 1 to 3 in just in less than 2 years. She was the associate vice president of client experience at DBS Private Bank. And after a decade of service as director of business development Asia Pacific with the New York Times, she's very accomplished, and we are very glad that she is with Sarthak. We then have Mr. Nived Iyer, who is the director of partnerships at Grant Thornton LLP UK, which is one of the largest law firms in the country, accounting firms, I'm sorry. And Mr. Iyer has wide experience in dealing with senior stakeholders, including business and product heads, including key EXCO members. In his current role, he's the director, head of data management and regulatory capability, RegTech partnership at Grant Thornton. We then have Mr. Srinivas Chakravarthula, who's the director of accessibility at Watermark Insights, where he leads an end-to-end accessibility program that includes training the workforce, doing product audits, creating and maintaining policies, and so on. He has more than 17 years of experience in the area of accessibility, which is very, very important in the sector that we are trying to work in. He's very passionate about raising awareness about accessibility. Then we have Poonam Burman, who's the Chief Human Resource Manager at Hindustan Lever. She has more than 2 decades of experience in HR business partnering in various industries like automobiles, textiles, oil and gas, engineering services, mining, products and services, telecommunications, FMCG, petrochemicals, and IT. I think you haven't left any field at all, Poonam. She is currently the CHRM for beauty and personal care vertical at Hindustan Lever. Before this, she worked in Reliance Communications, Hindustan Motors, Indian Oil, and I'm sure a lot more, where she has gained a lot of expertise and expertise in conceptualizing and then effecting HR processes and policies aligned to the needs of the business. She started a gender diversity group in the manufacturing shop floor and champions the inclusion and diversity agenda in corporate. Welcome, Poonam. And finally, we have Rahul Gupta, who is the ex-corporate banking head at Axis Bank, UK, and he's also on the Sarthak Advisory Board. He is a seasoned banker with over 16 years of experience across customer segments in the UK and India. He studied at St. Stephen's College and Delhi School of Economics, so quite pedigree, and has held quite some important positions of responsibility, has helped scale up businesses to a large level, including several industry-first landmark initiatives, dovetailing his experience with a passion for sustainability and make this Earth a greener planet. He has recently been recognized for his accomplishments by being picked for Business World 40 Under 40 list for 2021. We're very glad about that, Rahul. Congratulations. and welcome to the panel. Now, let's jump in. We only have about 20-25 minutes, so I'll ask the questions and I'll ask you to be concise, but very, say, with a strong answer, as strong as you can. Now, the first question I want to point towards Jane. Now, Jane, having worked in this sector, how far, according to you, D&I policies and efforts are successful compared with the expectations we have?
It's an interesting question, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here. I think things have changed since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, when we were talking to employers about employing disabled people, people with disabilities, it was a really hard sell. And I think a lot of employers were concerned about productivity and sickness and workplace accidents and all of those kinds of things, even though we know that disabled people are just as productive, have less time off sick. And actually, we call our candidates premium candidates because we bring all of those additional skills and talents with us that we've had to develop through navigating around the barriers that we face. Since the pandemic, I think things have changed a little bit. I think that organizations are recognizing that there are different ways of working, that people don't have to work full time. They don't have to be in the office every day, that there are different ways of working. And that really does open up opportunities for disabled people, because it means that, for example, some may be able to work from home rather than having to worry about inaccessible transport or inaccessible buildings. But also we've almost globally come across a skill shortage in almost every sector. And I think that organizations are now recognizing that if they need to fill those vacancies, those hard to fill vacancies, they need to look more broadly at where they're getting their candidates from. And that includes disabled people. And my response would say, I don't think there is a skill shortage. I just think that organizations aren't looking in the right places. My hope is that organizations will look on hiring disabled people not as an act of charity or anything to do with pity, but because they recognize that disabled people bring with us so many additional characteristics and traits that are going to be really beneficial to that organization. So it's not about pity, it's about talent.
Absolutely. No, but what about the difference between the expectations and the efforts? Do you think that the expectations we have from the corporate sector, are they aligned with the efforts they are making?
I think it varies. A lot of the corporates that we're working with are very committed to this, and they are changing their, as was mentioned in the presentation earlier on, they're changing policies and practices and HR ways of working to embrace a more diverse candidate base and workforce. But there are also corporates who are still stuck in, but we've always done it this way, so we're always going to do it this way. So I think it really varies, but I do see there's a shift into some of the expectations being met more so than they were before the pandemic.
Right. And do you think that that's actually coming from their inherent need or desire to do something for this sector? Or are they thinking that they're missing out on high quality talent just because they don't fit into a certain frame of reference? Or do you think that they are doing this just to look good in front of the investors?
I think that certainly before the pandemic, there were organizations who would do this because it made them look good. And it made, and they would talk about corporate social responsibility. I think now there is a move more towards organizations recognizing that this isn't about corporate social responsibility. This is about needing talented candidates in all sorts of roles across the organization, whether that's tech or whether it's creative or whatever it might be. There's a recognition that there's an awful lot of talent out there that has really been ignored up until now. So I hope that we are moving towards a recognition that this is about talent, not just about looking good or saying the right thing. And of course, candidates are much more choosy now because of the skill shortage. Candidates can say, I don't want to work for you because I don't think you're really inclusive. And that includes disabled people and non-disabled people. So I think every candidate now looks to their employer to see what they're doing in terms of social impact and environmental impact, and what kind of ethics they have and practices in terms of employment generally.
Mhm. Do you have any examples to share about the work that Even Break does in bridging this gap between people with disability finding jobs and then the corporate sector actually embracing it with open arms?
Yes, for sure. So I think what often happens is that an organization might be doing it for what we might call the wrong reasons, but then they employ someone who's disabled and then they realize, oh, actually, that was much easier than I thought it would be. And look at all this talent we've been missing out on. So we've got lots of corporations that we're working with across the globe who are looking at their recruitment practices and trying to remove some of those disabling barriers that disabled people and other candidates face generally. So I think what we're finding is it's one of those areas where success breeds success. So an organization gets disabled talent into the organization, recognizes this is a good thing and wants to do more and more to make that possible. And then other organizations can see that if they're not on board with this, they're going to get left behind very quickly and lose out on the war for talent.
Okay, but how would you go about it? How would you contact these organizations, and what's the pitch that you would make to them that they see the reason and the benefit?
Yeah, I think it's about storytelling a lot. It's about research, of course, as well, and studies. And there are lots of studies that talk about disabled people being just as productive as non-disabled people, having less time off sick, staying in their jobs longer, bringing all of these additional qualities I talked about, like problem solving and determination and creative thinking, that we have to develop in order to get through the barriers that we face every day. And then it's really saying to employers, if you want that talent, there are things that you need to do to attract that talent so that they know that you are really open to employing disabled people, and also to making sure that your recruitment processes and your work policies are adapted so that people can ask for adjustments maybe, or work differently or in different ways. So it's about organizations being much more flexible and innovative in the way they're thinking about talent and how to attract and employ all sorts of different people.
Thank you. And you think that the attitude that the corporates have or the employers have now is changing, and are they using that shift in attitude to also do something at the policy level? For example, if they were to advertise roles, then would they promote people with disability to apply, or will they even reserve some jobs for people with disability?
Yeah, we're finding, so at Even Break, we're a job board just for disabled candidates. So the people we work with, so we're biased because we work with the more enlightened companies, will pay to advertise their jobs on Even Break. And so the candidates, disabled candidates, can see this organization is actually proactively looking for talented disabled candidates. So they're more likely to apply and more likely to be open about any access needs they have. But what we found is that we also support employers in terms of becoming more inclusive and accessible. And they are recognizing that there may be things that are stopping disabled people from applying, or where they're dropping off in the recruitment process. And so they're looking at how they can change those policies and practices to make sure that they are much more accessible and more inclusive. And I think, candidates are quite savvy now, and they can see those organizations who are really making an effort in this area. And those organizations have certainly got an advantage when it comes to attracting and retaining the very best talent.
Right. Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks. And I want to move to Nevada here now to ask, how is so in London, if you finance and accounting, this is the heart of this industry in this world. How is this industry embracing the D&I efforts, or how is the finance and accounting industry adopting people with disability? Because this is something where you don't have to run, where you don't have to go on the shop floor, operate machinery, you have to work with your brain. So do you see that there is this, say, a lead that this industry has over the others?
Hi everyone. Thanks for that question, Abhishek. So I'll talk financial services in general. So that's probably my current background, though started off as an accountant, obviously CA from India. So I think the financial services industry is very much aggressively working on this agenda, on the D&I agenda. I'll use my personal example. Over the last sort of 7 years, I was with Barclays UK in London, and I was very much part of the D&I team, he for she, and my role, for one reason or the other, or more at a personal front, I've been a gender diversity lead, and so am I in my current role in Grant Thornton for large and complex teams. So I'm a gender diversity lead, and empowering women, or essentially when women return back to work after break, maternity or otherwise. So trying to make sure there's no discrimination, and there is enough opportunities, and they're treated fairly. So that has been something I've been closely working with. But in general, to answer your question, Abhishek, financial services in UK, and I wouldn't say just financial services, right? It's agnostic. If you open LinkedIn today, I think every second or third message you'll see is on diversity and how important it is, be it well, any diversity, right? Ethnic, gender, capability, etc., etc. So there is quite an active focus on that. There is a lot of there has been a lot of events that organizations have undertaken to make a general public aware, and to make them consciously aware, if that's even a term. What I was trying to say is there has been over the years a lot of unconscious bias built in, whether you agree or not, and organizations have also, as one example, invested in a lot of unconscious bias training. And you may think, oh, I'm doing all the right things and I can never be biased, but you would be really surprised to realize that, oh, actually by doing X or Y, I've been consciously biased as well. So there's a lot of focus on that. There are targets set for various D&I side of things, and probably one may think why you should have targets, but that is probably the way to start, I guess. I mean, you need to get to A level when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and then from that point, once you achieve that level, it has to be the way of life. So I don't know if that was a long answer to your question, but in short, across financial services, though I wouldn't restrict my response to that, there is immense focus on diversity and inclusion. Every organization you pick, there will be a D&I team. There will be a dedicated focus on that. There will be strategy around it, like in my current role as well. And there will be targets, like in my current role as well. So I don't know if that probably answers your question in a long way. Hopefully that gives enough insight, Abhishek.
Certainly does. So financial services is an industry which probably we should look at Sarthak for making people employable in that sector, maybe in the banking industry, or maybe in the telemarketing industry, banking services, financial services, which they can offer, and something to learn about. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to contribute, happy to be engaged, involved in whatever way I can help. Definitely something I would like to be part of in helping.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Nice.
My next question, I want to go towards Srinivasu on the topic of accessibility. Now, Srinivas, you have long experience in this sector, but do you have some tips to share on how do we make our digital workplace more inclusive?
Sure. Firstly, Hari Om to everyone, and thanks for inviting me. And also my respect and congratulations to Dr. Athreya for his Padma Bhushan. All right, now coming to your question about what is some of the tips that are to be to ensure that inclusion in the digital workspace. In fact, while pandemic is actually given us a lot of trouble and a lot of people have actually lost their lives and all, but it actually created the opportunities to people with disabilities in particular. earlier, if you have to work from home, you need to take a lot of approvals. But now, if you have to go to office, you need to take a lot of approvals. So eventually, there is the opportunity for people to work from home. As Jean mentioned, you don't have to deal with inaccessible transport or inaccessible buildings, right? So when it comes to the workplace, and thanks to all the communication channels such as Zoom, Google Meet, Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams, so all of them are actually pretty accessible. And one of the things that people focusing on is that they're making sure that the infrastructure that is provided to employees are accessible. Not necessarily at every organization. That is because it is not that they intend to provide the inaccessible environment. It is again due to the lack of awareness. But if we are able to onboard employees with this in the name of skill set, right, then dealing with the inaccessibility of the technology or of the digital workspace is actually easier thing to do. Like one of the things we have been advocating for quite some time is about, though it's actually smallest for the organizations, like they every now and then their HRs send out different emails to people about celebration of Ugadi, or celebration of Holi, or celebration of the whatever festival and whatever day it is, right? But oftentimes, even the work anniversary emails, they remain inaccessible because, particularly to people with visual disabilities, because most of them, it is created as an image, which does not have the text alternative. So people have to struggle using their OCRs or something. But now, the awareness actually getting created. And also, it is not only the role of employers or the HRs, it is also the role of the employees who have to go forward and tell the people what the problem is all about and how they can help to make it resolved. And as compared to physical infrastructure, it is less expensive to solve the digital inaccessibility. So it is, but people would only get to know about the issues when they actually know the problems by the end users. So it is equally the responsibility of end users who have to really come forward. But one thing in all my through career in the product organizations and different companies, there is no organization that I have ever seen that who actually says that, no, we don't do anything about making sure your things easier or making your job easier. It is all about how we approach. And today, I've also noticed that people would actually want to hire people based on the skills, and then want to offer them any possible help that they need or any reasonable accommodation. And of course, law is also coming forward and actually helping in areas that is actually needed. But a lot of places, things are getting resolved without the legal intervention.
So Srinivas, when you talk about accessibility, are you talking about digital accessibility in terms of just making the software available to people who may have some special needs? And when you talk about that, are you talking about people with visual disability? Or are you talking about any physical disability? What is that lack of accessibility today that you are trying to address?
So to me, accessibility is about not just a particular disability, it's actually for cross disability and even beyond disability. Right? So when it comes to accessibility, there are a few things is that, one, of course, it has to work for people with visual disabilities, which means it has to work with the screen reading softwares, and it has to work with people with mobility disabilities, those who actually prefer able to use only the keyboard or only the mouse. Or it's not only the people with disabilities, there are also power users who actually prefer to use keyboard alone, right? And there are also people who are, due to the age, who might develop some sort of disabilities. Even accessibility is required to them. So accessibility is not about only a particular section of people. It is all one needs to do is, and also another myth that I want to break here is that a lot of people will think that, okay, if I have to make the software accessible to X person with disability, I have to write a special code, or I have to build a separate screens or workflows for them, which is actually not. It is all about the vendors or the developers has to just follow the global accessibility standards, which is web content accessibility guidelines, which is written by the W3C, right? And even if you're building web mobile applications, there are standards in place, not only by W3C and also respective the operating system vendors such as Google and Apple, right? So the standards are in place.
That's useful. So use the global standards already in place to make software accessible to everybody. And if there are global standards around it, it then step in the right direction. Probably companies with software development capabilities, they need to keep in mind these standards when they write their code. So thanks, Srinivasan.
Yeah.
Giselle, in your experience of working in different countries and then various fields and in the services business, do you think that this is a sector where people with disability can find gainful employment?
Yes, I think overall the key takeaway that I found after working with different companies across the world is we should actually take a step backward instead of before focusing on hiring the disabilities. We should, as an employer or as someone who has relatively different skill set from the disabilities, I think we should take a step back in feeling how they feel in reality. So I think, like I've mentioned in the last discussion as well, we have worked with organization to cater some of this unique experience for our private clients, say for example, to have a dinner in the dark. So they know how the blinds actually feel, how difficult it is of getting food fed into the mouth, how they can actually hold the fork or knife to cut the food, and how much more attention that they have to pay in order to get a simple thing done. So everything would be very different. So once a normal person get to know how these should be processed, then they will come up with the thoughts of having the disabilities to be included in the real world, because realistically, the real world would have different kind of people, right? And I think it's very important for us to understand, like Jane talked about previously as well, we have to recognize the shift of the global changing of the different kind of disabilities. Now that when we talk about disabilities, it's probably a lot of people will think of, oh, someone who's physically disabled or blind or hearing problem. But in fact, there are a lot of different kind of disabilities like generation gaps, personality types, thinking style, especially after all these pandemic era. I think we will have more different people created in this world. So
you are talking about empathy, that you understand, you put yourself in the shoes of the disabled people and see what we should do. And that's a great point. Empathy is the start of all the efforts. Great.
Yes, and I think it's very important that this is the way how we find our self-awareness in order to lead the team, to lead the company. At the end of the day, yes, it's business first, but business is also a vehicle to achieve social justice and civil rights, right? Right. So I think it's important for us to find our blind spots in order to process all the ability to listen and to learn better.
Right. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Then moving to Poonam. Poonam, you work in very important sector of human resources, and you have access to all the decision makers, and you've worked in this sector for a long time. So I want to ask you, how do we get the entire company focused on D&I? Because yes, for the recruiters, it is a KRA now that, okay, what's your D&I score? Yeah. But how do we take it company-wide? What should we do to make everybody in the company aware about it, and also an advocate towards D&I?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, we have to start with, first of all, a conscious communication and advocacy. Now, for FMCG, I will just give example of my current company, which is we say that we have 10% of our consumers who are with disabilities, right? Because 10% of your population, we say, is estimated to be consumers.
We are losing you.
Hello.
Do you have
Hello. Hello.
Yes, we are losing you. It's not very clear. Do you have a mic? Do you have a headphone mic?
I don't.
Yeah. Now it's fine. If you stay in this
now
angle,
it's fine.
maybe
Okay,
it's fine.
I'll come closer. Yeah. So it's like, are our organizations representative of our consumer base? If your consumer base has 10% of population who are persons with disability, why can't and why should not our organization should have the same representation? And with that, we do a lot of communication to start with. And yes, rightly Jane said, it starts with tokenism. It starts with top-down targets. But once we have the first success, it breeds success. In manufacturing, unlike financial sector and technology sector, in manufacturing, the shop floor work is difficult. It's hard, it's manual, heavy work. And probably that was the reason for many years we were focusing only on white collar jobs to bring in more inclusion. However, we as HR person, that was the biggest thing that we broke that you maximum employee base is in your manufacturing factories. We have 30 factories in India, and the maximum employees are there. And if we don't provide inclusion, or we don't start with including people there in factories, now we are not going to have a representative of 10% of PWD population in our factories. So to start with, a lot of communication, bringing in the removing this unconscious bias which is in our mind, and start with small success. So when we started, we worked very closely with Sarthak, and it was the other way around. I found Sarthak to help me for my factory work which we wanted to do. And we started with making all our factories accessible in terms of infrastructure. We then concentrated on what are the abilities which maps and which kind of jobs can match those abilities. We never focused on the disability. We focused on what ability these people brings, which a job can be done with those ability. So typically, when we did the job mapping, we found out that there are some 5 to 10%, 15% in some locations, jobs which can be done by PWD candidates. And then we were looking for the best NGO who can help us in creating the sensitization, doing our audits, making our infrastructure foolproof, and then doing recruitment. And we work very closely with Sarthak. So we have done 100% of PWD sensitization workshop. And I must say that once that workshops were done, all our employees, they were like fully aware of this agenda. Otherwise, they were just reading about it and they were not knowing the crux of it. It took only 5 minutes or 10 minutes to train everyone on the sign language. It is that easy. We realize that it is in our mind that we think that till my infrastructure is ready, we should not bring them. We have a lot of disabilities where you don't require specific, very special infrastructure also. They are they can come and work in your factories in the normal infrastructure. So we have to answer your questions, a lot of communication, workshops and sensitization. And it started with bringing the business outside in, which is like, if your consumers are people with disability, your manufacturing and your organization must have same representative population, at least
Wonderful.
To start with, to become a truly inclusive organization.
No, that's a very important point, that you see your customers, 10% of your target base is people with disability. And that's also the point that Giselle brought in about empathy. If you don't empathize, you can't do much about this sector. And I really liked your point about sensitization and HR actually being that advocate inside the organization about mapping all the job functions with the traits which are needed to actually perform that well. And yes, if there is a checklist, if you know that, okay, this kind of job can be done by people with these skills, then disability goes out of the window.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Poonam. And now I want to ask Rahul one final question. So Rahul has worked in the UK, he's worked in India. What's the difference, Rahul, do you see in the D&I sector and this, say, how do corporates embrace this in India compared to what you've seen in Europe?
Hi, Abhishek. Thank you. Maybe I was expecting that, given my stint on both sides. No, I think both markets have their own, and the way one has to think of it, right? Where are we on our evolution journey? I think a country like India, our people basically are first running for the regular bread and butter, right? Whereas, so the whole thought process now, ultimately, our conscious or our thought processes basis where we are in the whole value chain. I think and that's what comprises our society, and that's what leads to our reactions. When you're in UK, people definitely have a larger social security, and that's where they get that time and probably a bandwidth to look at people with disability as part of the whole. I think in our rush and hustle and bustle in India, people often get missed out. Not that people are not open to this, but maybe we don't find focus on people. I still remember getting lost on one of the tube stations in London, and I was just as a VVIP. Now, to me, it was a very pleasant surprise. I still carry it, and I think it's something which eventually will happen. As a student of economics, there's a beautiful subject called economic systems, which talks about how evolutions happen. But I think one of the things that I've seen in India is, again, maybe it'll connect from our culture. We are very open. Maybe as Poonam mentioned, people may not know, but if you make an attempt to explain them what it is, they are very, very open to it. With West, while they have gone up the curve, one of the problems that I've generally seen, it still get templatized. All visual impairments will still get classified as visual. I was surprised when I went to Moorfields. So I got operated at the Moorfields Eye Hospital to stop the deterioration beyond a particular point. And when I went to the low vision age section there, I mean, the kind of questions they had, while they were sitting in one of the most, renowned eye hospital in the world, I could see that people could not distinguish between full visual impairment to partial visual impairment to severe sighted and all that. Even visual impairment is just not one category, right? Yes. There could be 1,000 different situations within one category. But I think these are things which go up the learning curve. One of the similar, so I did talk about what's different. What's similar and a problem statement, and perhaps I see some stalwarts here. One of the problems I see, I still believe the openness is more towards entry jobs or mid-level jobs. I'm not sure. In fact, it's a separate conversation which I can pick. But when I was leaving UK and I was trying my best to stay back, there are still very limited people who could comprehend or who could accept in their mind to give £1 million job to a visually sighted employee. Think of it, it's not the easiest thing to do. But clearly, these are some of the stages that we all need to cross. One, getting the percentage done in the workforce. And the second problem to be addressed is, are we getting those percentages across the layers? When we talk about the top 100 folks, people in the world are 10, Divyangs. When you talk about the 100 most influential people in the world, are 10% of that are Divyangs. Our top 100, out of the top 100 CEOs, our top 10 or within those are 10% or 10 people are CEOs with visual impairment. I think some of the people here are doing incredible job, but it's a part of the journey. But it will take time, but all our efforts really have to be how to move people from the shop floors to the office floors. Awesome. How do we ensure that instead of, while people are getting promoted and people earn it by merit, People clearly earn it by merit. There are enough horrifying stories that we still see. While there is enough to celebrate, there are still horrifying stories that we all come across where people get left out because managers could not believe that some of these people could deliver. And so, kudos to some of the stuff that I heard from Jane, Gidel, Poonam, Shini. I think if we all collectively put that effort, we'll all see those numbers coming.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I think we are running a bit behind schedule here. So towards closing, there are lots of questions that I've got in the feed, but there's one question I really want to pitch to all of you, all the panelists here, and I request you to be very brief. Everybody wants to do D&I in their company. I want to do D&I in my company. My wife wants to do D&I in her company. But the question that all of us have is, where do we start? What do we do? What's the first thing that we do? So can I ask all 5 of you who are still on the panel with us, where do we start?
I think it's about talking to people who are diverse and getting their perspectives. So if you have disabled people within your organization already, have conversations with them about what you're doing well, what you could do better, how you could do things differently. If you don't have disabled people within your organization, bring in experts, bring in people with lived experience of disability who can perhaps give you some advice and guidance on how to become more inclusive and accessible.
Thank you. Thank you. Giselle, what would you say? Where do I start?
I think you may have to have a relook at your business first, on where you would like to move forward to, which direction you would like to go. Find your weakness or find your strengths, about what kind of talents are lacking in your organization, and then to talk to, like Jane said, to talk to the relevant disability talents to see how they can help on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Poonam, to you.
Yes, so I think, to start with, create allyship, create groups who can really spread the message all around, and give targets, because to push down, you start with targets, and then things happen with this ally group who are, who create the allyship for this specific inclusions.
Okay, okay. And Srini, what's your take? What's the first step?
So I think let's actually get inspired by a little bit of our history, especially in India. So I was just recently reading a literature where in the kingdoms, they used to employ people with LGBT as I say, security people in the queen of halls. Right. So, and also there are a lot of examples where they used to generate employment to people with disabilities, right, instead of doing charity. So it's all about, irrespective of you have people with diverse needs or disabilities or anything, ensure that your workplace is accessible, your digital space is accessible, and whatever applications that comes in, start looking at their skill and merit versus the disability or anything, but also ensure that in your advertisements, make sure that you are an equal opportunity employer, and you really kind of damn care about whether the person has a disability or anything. As long as they have skill, we have an opportunity for them, and we are here to give them all the reasonable accommodation. And it is not a preset of reasonable accommodation. It can be very, like Rahul very well pointed out about the diverse needs of even by set category of people with disabilities, right? So you can actually create the reasonable accommodations once the people come on board based on their needs. So it's not like a preset of things.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Rahul, just quickly, what's the starting point?
Abhishek, very quickly, conscious of time. So the best way to include is to ensure that you have minimum exclusions. So in your screening criteria, there are organizations like Google where anything and everything that creates distinction at the time of initial assessment, screenings, all those parameters are done with it. So freedom from exclusion is the way to inclusion. That's one. Second, if you see a candidate with special needs, the best is to have an open conversation, which I had 16 years back with my employer. Just before I leave the floor, as I lead the private equity coverage at my organization, one thing I promise you guys, any organization, they like it or not, DE&I is going to be a reality, because capitalism will ultimately force everybody to adapt to SDG goals. So the only thing we need to ensure is that these get implemented in the right way. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Rahul. All right. So thank you very much. We ran over by a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Abhishek, maybe we want to hear Jane on that. She's still on the screen.
Jane, any final words from you? Jane did say though.
Yeah, same as I agree with what everybody said.
Yeah, good. All right. So thanks a lot. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for joining. We hope to carry on this series of webinars to just create this awareness, take it to another level, maybe take some ideas about what we should do at Sarthak, what we should look for from our sponsors, and what kind of interactions we seek with our corporate sponsors. So with that, thanks. And I hope that you will also join us again in the next webinar that we will have next month. Thanks, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Sanha. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.